Okay, so we've got Warhorse 6 on Sword Attack. Killer Klaus will be healing the party between turns. And support spells are going to be handled by this guy whose screen name might be an ethnic slur, but we're giving him the benefit of the doubt because it's written out too elite to actually pronounce. Now then, party, let us drink to victory! Guys, what is this thing?
What, that? That's your health indicator, Arnie.
My health what?
Your health indicator. You know, to display your remaining health.
Since when?
Since forever, Arnie. You've always had it. It's always getting caught in car doors or blocking movie screens. Are you telling me you've never noticed it before?
I'm pretty sure I would have noticed this giant red thing floating over my head.
Let's be honest, Arnie, it wouldn't be the first time significant aspects of health and personal hygiene have mysteriously escaped your attention. When was the last time you had a bath?
I don't see any health bars hovering over your heads.
Yes, well, that's because we're humans, Arnie, and we don't just leave that sort of personal thing flopping around outside like some kind of barnyard animal.
Wait, why does the fourth heart have half of it missing?
Well, usually it's because your health is damaged in some way. Did you get hurt recently?
Yeah, I just fell out of my chair upstairs.
Well, there you go then.
Wait, if that's my health indicator, does that mean that if I fall out of my chair 7 more times, I die?
Nobody ever said you were put together real well.
What?
Relax, Arnie. You're almost at full health. Even with your coordination, it would be improbable for you to fall out of your chair 7 more times in one day.
Yeah, there's really no reason to get too concerned until you're at 1 heart or less.
Wait, you guys have been seeing this health indicator the whole time, right? Have you ever seen it with just 1 heart left and didn't tell me? You have. Have you ever seen it with a single half heart left?
Well...
How many times have you seen my health with only 1 half heart left?
I mean, an active individual such as yourself, a certain amount of wear and tear is expected.
Ah!
Stress kills, Arnie.
Hello, video gamers. Shutanaka here, and today we're going to have a frank and informative talk about your health bars. That's right, those things that appear in the corner of the screen and give you a running total of just how dead you are.
They're like Fitbits, but from the Saw franchise.
But where did health bars come from? How have they changed over time? Who was the first man who decided we needed an omnipresent visual reminder of our own mortality, particularly since teenagers already exist? To find the answer to this question, you must come with us back in time to the very dawn of video game history.
Just remember not to touch anything or you may erase yourself from existence.
It's why we wear gloves. It may surprise you to learn, video gamers, that in the early days of video games, the late 70s and early 80s, there weren't any health indicators whatsoever. Granted, in large part, this was due to the early games having you assume the role of avatars along the lines of ping-pong paddles or single white pixelated squares, for whom health and longevity were rarely pressing issues, but even when early games did have you playing as a living creature, the experience was completely health bar free.
And how did these early games get around displaying health indicators in simulations of life and death struggles?
By having every single enemy, no matter how minor, just flat out one-shot kill you.
Rage quitting really hadn't been perfected yet.
See, at this point in video game history, most games were found in arcades, and your average video arcade didn't really want their customers taking long extended play sessions, at least not all in the same 25 cents. The faster the player bit the dust, the sooner they were either shoveling in more quarters or clearing out so that the next player in line could do the same. Giving the player any kind of built-in buffer between themselves and the great beyond would have gone counter to their philosophy. And yet, despite this, these early arcade games were still relevant to the evolution of health indicators, for while instant death remained the law of the land, most games still gave you a couple separate attempts, or lives, per credit, and it was considered good form to have some sort of visual element on screen to represent that. In the 1981 arcade classic Galaga, for instance, that representation of remaining lives took the form of multiple tiny ships lined up in a row at the lower left corner of the screen. While perhaps not representing the player's health itself, it at least served as a constant reminder of how long until they next had to shell out cold hard cash to prolong their existence, thus serving as a reasonable simulacrum of the United States healthcare system. The first game to use an on-screen bar to indicate players' health is widely believed to be 1984's Dragon Buster, in which the hero Clovis, mind you, battles through multiple castles to determine which one actually contains his kidnapped princess. And if you ignore the possibility that 1985 Super Mario Bros. Is basically just a psychedelic ripoff of that exact same premise, then that will have been the most interesting fact you will ever hear about Dragon Buster. Just look at you, you've forgotten it already. Now, it was at approximately this point in video game history that a seismic shift occurred in game design, spurred largely by the successful launch of the Famicom, better known in the Western world as the Nintendo Entertainment System, or that game box, when used in the context of your mother yelling at you to go play outside. A combination of improved processing power and independence from loose change-fueled game sessions resulted in the creation of longer, more elaborate video game levels, as well as new techniques to assist the player in staying alive through the whole experience. For the first time, we saw the gaming industry as a whole make a coordinated move away from the accepted norm of casually and repeatedly murdering their player base. Of course, health indicators did not become an immediate standard. Super Mario Bros., for instance, still relied on the traditional multiple lives system by introducing a power-up system which, when active, would allow him to take one extra mild bump on the ankle by a Goomba before shedding his mortal coil. Arguably, the first game to really bring on-screen health indicators into the mainstream was 1986's smash hit The Legend of Zelda. Taking a visual cue from arcade games like Galaga, Zelda's health meter was not a single solid bar, but rather a series of little hearts that would gradually disappear as the player took damage. Zelda also innovated a bit by allowing the player to extend their health meter through the collection of heart containers and to replenish empty hearts by walking over health pickups and devouring live fairies.
I don't think Link actually eats the live fairies.
It's clearly implied.
In short order, and particularly within the NES ecosystem, where about 80% of all available titles ended up being essentially the exact same platforming game, health indicators were adopted by nearly all major releases.
While there was some variation in presentation, from the purely stat-based health meters of early RPGs like Final Fantasy to the on-screen facial pummeling of id Software's Wolfenstein 3D, most games settled comfortably on either a Zelda-esque heart meter or a simple utilitarian health bar, and progress basically stopped there for a while. Because the mass of games that used health bars were fairly straightforward action titles, there was no real pressing need to reinvent this particular wheel. When the player was injured, the health bar went down. When the player was healed, the health bar went up.
It was a system designed to be read at a glance while most of the player's attention was focused on not being torn apart by murder elves. And for many games, that exact same system serves that exact same purpose today.
Tracking health, that is, not murder elves.
As far as we know.
But yes, so long as the player's sole pressing concern was physical damage, a conventional health bar was all they ever really needed.
I know people in the real world whose quality of life would improve immensely if that was their sole concern.
And so mainstream health bar innovation kind of got caught in a holding pattern for a decade or so, with only minor variations introduced from time to time that were, in almost all cases, quickly abandoned in favor of the traditional health indicators. And yet, as the world approached the new millennia, there were to be changes on the horizon, and they would be enabled by one major factor. The world was getting nerdier. See, while action games never had much need to track the player's condition beyond how dead he currently was, role-playing games have, from time immemorial,
The 70s, basically.
used a wide variety of statistics to model all manner of attributes and conditions, from manual dexterity to embarrassing personal diseases. Where action games would pelt the player with bullets and grenades, role-playing games would inflict them with debilitating muscle tremors or give them crushing ennui, and a variety of systems were developed to help the players keep track of these conditions. Now, it's important to note that many of these systems originated back in the tabletop gaming days. Unlike the fast and frantic action of your typical platformer or shooter, your average turn-based pen and paper RPG had a frame rate of about 1 refresh per every 6 minutes, longer if anybody had to get up and use the bathroom. Even when RPGs eventually made the jump to video games with a somewhat simplified array of track stats, most of these were buried in menu systems that required multiple button presses to access. While RPG players enjoyed the richness of gameplay that these additional variables provided, publishers understood that it took a very specific personality type to navigate through 3 menu screens in search of the exact percentage of psychic damage resistance they gained from acquiring a new pair of boots, without either falling asleep or outright dying of boredom in the process.
Likewise, the designers understood that if they attempted to shoehorn in all relevant RPG stats in an at-a-glance graphic on the main game screen, they'd only have about 30 pixels left to display the actual game. Thus, deep stat-tracking systems remained largely the domain of role-playing and simulation games, while action games continued to mainly pay attention to how many times you got shot.
And yet progress marches on, particularly in an industry where 25% of the gross relies on sheer novelty factor. In 2001, for instance, Halo for the original Xbox popularized a then-unique shield and health system in which the player's health bar depleted normally, but was guarded by an additional overlaid shield bar that would regenerate over time, adding a layer of strategy without drastically crapping up the user interface. In the same general era, games like Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, The Elder Scrolls III Morrowind, and Lionhead's Fable gently massaged the RPG genre into a form less likely to elicit uncontrolled yawning from innocent bystanders: the action RPG.
Action RPGs managed to bring much of the complexity of traditional role-playing games to wider action-oriented audiences, keeping most of the elaborate statistical systems intact through the ingenious practice of allowing the player to ignore them entirely in favor of whacking goblins repeatedly in the head with a club.
Yes, by hiding most of the complex RPG machinery behind the scenes, players were treated to a deeper gaming experience without necessarily understanding why, as the main user interface looked largely the same as those of straight action games, except that the health meter would now often be modified to display magic, stamina, or status indicators as well. Inch by inch, year by year, the nerds encroached deeper and deeper into the territory of the normals. This could, of course, lead into a deeper conversation about how the advent of live service games gradually got the players used to heads-up displays that look like a typesetting machine sneezed on them, but we're going to keep this video health bar-centric. We'll deal with live service games another day.
Boy, will we.
Now, the trajectory we were on would seem to indicate that health bars would simply keep getting more and more complex over time, and for some games that's certainly true. But in the modern era, well, health bars are more like college sophomores who have taken a summer to go find themselves.
They're drunk and nursing a mild venereal disease.
Well, more that they're no longer following a set path, Chan. While some health indicators have become visual Swiss Army knives, others have followed more minimalist routes. For many games that use regenerating health mechanics like the Uncharted series, there's no traditional health bar at all, instead relying on things like screen saturation and overlaid iris effects, even a pulsating tremor vibrating on the controller to convey that a character is close to death.
You can also use this method to diagnose real-life elderly people.
And then there are audio health bars, multiple health bars, misspelled Heath bars. Yes, health bars are all over the map now in terms of form and often even function, but even now in this second decade of the 3rd millennium AD, it's not difficult at all to find modern games with health bars virtually indistinguishable from those of the NES era. And why not? After all, if it's not broke,
as would be indicated by an unfilled portion of the health bar,
then don't fix it. For hundreds of platformers and shooters, the standard health bar is all they'll ever need. For everything else, Well, I think we've demonstrated that we can make it work. And that, Arnie, is everything you need to know about the evolution of the health bar. Any questions?
I didn't ask about the evolution of the health bar. What I asked is, how do I make it so I don't die after 8 whacks?
Oh, well, that's easy enough. Since your current HMO has you on the multiple heart system, all you need to do is get some extra heart containers and then, eat a whole turkey or something.
What now?
I suppose it would be more aesthetically appropriate to get you on some kind of Sonic the Hedgehog-ish golden ring system, but frankly, given your salary, you'd probably be safer with the hearts.
None of this makes any sense.
Well, no, given that your medical training consists of falling asleep while streaming Season 2 of House, that doesn't surprise me. Come on, let's go to the workshop and I'll set you up with some extra heart containers.
You have heart containers in the workshop?
Well, old peanut butter jars, they're mostly clean.
Is there any peanut butter still in them?
It is amazing that you're still alive, Arnie. Like the video gamers? We have more such wonders to show you, and all you have to do is subscribe and hit the notifications button.
I mean, you don't have to.
Also consider becoming a patron by following the link to our Patreon page, where we turn your cash into videos, comics, and games using the darkest of dark magics.
But mostly just cash.